It is Friday, January 23rd. Let's talk PlayStation. Welcome back, everyone, to another Highguard episode of LTPS. As per usual, let's begin with our PS Plus reminder. The January monthly games are still live on PSN. Make sure you claim those. Also, PS Plus Extra and Premium, those games are now live on PSN as well for the January lineup. And just as a little PSA, Ridge Racer, expectedly, no trophies. So that's still the Bandai Namco way, where we now understand publishers have to pay for that feature for their classic games, which they still do not do, and that's frustrating. But having said that, with the new lineup now live on PSN, that means we have some games that will exit the game catalog in about a month's time. So this is your last call for these games, which is Carto, Cult of the Lamb, New World Eternum. That game is actually going to be completely delisted and shut down on January 31st next year, so a full year to play that game, but through Plus, about a month left. And then Res Infinite, Saga Frontier Remastered, Super Neptunia RPG, The Ascent, and WWE 2K25. So get your time in on those games. And jumping right into our first news story, we have some news for PS3 game streaming on PS Plus Premium, which at the time of filming, it is still broken. It's been broken for about 3-ish days, but it's broken in a very particular way, which is if you have not streamed a PS3 title before, a particular game, then it won't work. You can keep hitting X on it, it just will not launch the stream. So the weird thing about, how PSN handles your digital library, we all know that you don't have to necessarily purchase a digital license for a game. You can simply download it from Essential, Extra, Premium, or stream a PS3 game, and that title is still added to your collection on console. Right, so that's the one way where if the game is added to your collection, it will stream, but if you never streamed it before, then it won't work. So the workaround currently is to launch the PS Plus app on PC, stream something there, then it's added to the collection, and then go back to console, then you can stream it properly, or you can try wishlisting the game, and then from the wish list, the stream might be able to work there, but it's obviously just a weird broken thing, because PS3 streaming does work, just that the way that you launch the games, there's some sort of weird back-end issue going on, so hopefully Sony will address that fairly soon. It's the same thing we always say about the PS3 streaming functionality. It is a feature of Premium, so they should be addressing it and making sure that it's working properly for those that do interact with that feature, but it's not a great way to play PS3 games. I always say just kind of not worth it in my view because the games don't look good. There's still some heavy latency. Those are server racks that Sony established over 10 years ago, so it's not a very good experience in my view, but it's miraculous that it's still around and they still work and they're functioning. It's got to be hard to maintain those server blades for as long as they have been doing that, so I can't picture a scenario where they're going to be around for too much longer, and that will be a lot of PS3 games that are no longer playable on PS4, PS5, but again, it wasn't a good way to play those games anyway. We need either financing of ports to the console natively or proper emulation, which we know that is also a long, windy road, which Implicit's working on it. Redo Apps now has one in-house, so it's still going to be a long time, I think, until we have a lot of native playback for some of these classics that are still not available just yet. Moving on to some game news with Bungie's Marathon, where we now have full pre-order details for this game. It's coming out March 5th on PS5, PC, and Xbox Series S and X. It's going to cost $40 for the base version, and then $60 for the deluxe edition. That's going to come with 7 runner shells, 200 silk tokens, weapon and runner cosmetics, and also a premium rewards pass voucher. And then there's also a collector's edition as well that comes with a statue and other physical goods for $190 USD, and that does not include the game, so no physical or digital copy. And then there's also a DualSense and Pulse Elite headset revealed as well. Pre-orders start January 29th for those, releasing when the game comes out as well. So expectedly, Sony does have a number of things to showcase when it comes to this game launching relatively soon. You've got your controller and headset you can buy, the big collector's edition, which now they're going down the path of no copy of the game, $190 buy the base copy, that comes out to $250 all in for the game. So that's the same ballpark usually for those bigger collector's editions. It's just a compromise, even though it sounds silly that it doesn't have the game, but we've seen other publishers mess around with that, so that's not too unusual, I would say, if you want to buy just more goods for the game itself. But otherwise, the game is coming out soon. It would appear as though the game is going to have an initial audience I mean, the big question clearly is, will it be able to maintain that long term? And maintain it in a way where it doesn't go down the very typical path of, oh, Marathon loses 90% of its player base after X, Y, and Z amount of time. You know, depending on that time frame, that's not going to be nearly as bad as some make it out to be, because it's incredibly difficult for any live service game to maintain that many players over a substantial amount of time. So there's still a lot of unknowns with Marathon, but Bungie does appear to be taking a lot of feedback in. They took a lot in from that alpha, and so the various alphas that they ran. So in theory, the game is much more established and probably going to do fairly well initially. It's more about how they maintain that long term. Next up, we have some US video game sales data coming in from Circana, which comes courtesy of Matt Piscatella of Circana, which tracks video game sales data here in the US. And so we have a very impressive metric for Sucker Punch's Ghost of Yōtei, where this game debuted very well. So we have the top 10 best-selling new games of 2025. So to clarify, this is for new games released during the calendar year. And Ghost of Yōtei is number 3. The only single-player game in the top 10 exclusively on PlayStation 5. It's under Battlefield 6 and NBA 2K26, but also over Black Ops 7, which we now know was a pretty big historic low for the franchise, the lowest since 2008's World at War. But that's actually very good, including all games throughout the top 20 of the best-selling titles throughout 2025. Then Yōtei was number 11, so that includes everything that was selling on the retail market and digital. But otherwise, number 3 is impressive. To be the only single-player game in the top 10 next to all these heavy multiplayer live service titles that oftentimes come out on an annual basis really shows how well this game did. Even if it might be tracking a little bit behind Tsushima, it seems like the game has some decent sales legs too. So we'll see long term, but Sony's got to be pretty happy, especially considering, you know, they're one of the few big publishers that are still putting out big cinematic AAA experiences like they were so well known for during the late PS4 cycle, and they're still able to find a consistent audience for these games. Now, if they can keep doing that and maintaining that long term with their studios where it takes 5, 6, 7 years to make these games, you know, there's still some concerns in that area, but at least for Yōtei, the game is performing quite well, which I'm happy to see. I finally started my playthrough as well. Very strong opening. I'm really enjoying it so far. I'm already like knee-deep hooked into it, just like I was with Tsushima. So I'm so happy to be back into the game now, or at least starting to play it, since I was doing 30 Platinums in October. But it's really great to see Yōtei doing as well as it's doing amongst all these multiplayer games. Now, we did also have some other interesting sales metrics from, again, Circana, courtesy of Matt Piscatella, so again, shout out to him for disclosing this, but we have some sales ratios for PlayStation hardware. So, again, in the US, 2025, 49% of PS5s and 66% of Xbox Series hardware sales in this year did not include a physical disk drive. 13% of PS5 purchases in 2025 were Pro models, and the PlayStation Portal now has a 7% attach rate to PS5 hardware life to date. So that one is the entirety of the Portal's life on the market, up to 7% for an attach ratio, which is crazy high. I mean, we said that when it was 5%. I would have thought for sure this thing, life to date, is doing 2, maybe 3%. And we don't have global numbers, but you have to figure it's not too far off from that 7%, which is much higher than what Sony reasonably thought, or what you would think they thought, because this thing is such a niche device. It's got a very particular use case, and also the experience is still not guaranteed for a lot of households. Even within your home network, it is still like a very dodgy hit or miss experience, as it tends to be in my own environment. So it is just insane that the device has sold that well. And we know the device is quite sticky for users that do own it, because it does account for 50% of all remote play sessions. Now, the Pro number, or the sales ratio there, it's actually very similar, extremely close to PlayStation 4. You know, previously, or at least initially, the sort of high end of that was 1 in every 5 PS5 sold, or 4 PS4 sold, which was true for PS5 Pro when the console initially released. But the US number at the tail end of PS4 was around that 13-something%. So they are right on the money again for what is a very high average selling price of that console. And then for the disk drives, yeah, we saw that it was starting to get 50-50. I always say that when the generation kicked off, at least on the PlayStation side of things, it was 80-20. Sony was primarily selling disc consoles, and now it has gotten more even. So it's not entirely surprising, but it does show that Sony is selling a lot of consoles that are not equipped with a disc drive, but those are all now primarily systems that can accept a disc drive down the road. So I am curious what the sales are like for the disc drive after the fact, right? How many of those are they reasonably selling for those digital consoles, which has an initial lower barrier of entry for people to get into PS5, and then maybe down the road they're like, okay, I want to enjoy the benefits of being able to buy and sell physical media. Now, getting into our third-party news stories, we have the Xbox Developer Direct from yesterday, which showcased 4 games: Forza Horizon 6, Beast of Reincarnation, the secret 4th game was Kiln from Double Fine, and then also Fable from Playground Games, which Playground is doing Fable and Forza this year, so they've been very busy. Let's begin with Forza Horizon 6, which we got a very thorough gameplay deep dive. The game looks very good, very gorgeous, showcasing a lot of Japanese cars naturally, so the Nissan Z, Honda Civic Type R, some K cars I think I saw in there, but also the beautiful Japanese scenery and locations, showcasing the vibrancy of the cherry blossom trees to the density of Tokyo city streets. Location is a very important role for the Horizon franchise, so they really have to nail Japan for what is a very important location. Seems like they're doing quite a good job so far based off this trailer, but they did also confirm the May 19th release for PC and Xbox, and they also confirmed the PS5 version is later this year. So that was our one curiosity based on our story last week about the in-game pop-up in Horizon 5 showing off that May 19th release. We know PS5 is later, but how much later? With May being right around the corner, not too far away, you got to think PS5 will show up within this year, so we now know, yes, it is within this year. After that, they went into Beast of Reincarnation, which is the Game Freak title, which certainly stands out with Game Freak being primarily known for Pokemon titles, and the non-Pokemon games are not quite the same scope as this game in particular, so they showed off a gameplay deep dive of this as well, which they spent a lot of time talking about the traversal throughout the world, which is plagued by a blight. There's a big motif in the game, which is plants, how they're used to getting around, but also appearing in combat. Game Freak says on more than one occasion they're applying a lot of methodology from the Pokemon series into this game, and combat is third-person melee with parries, stealth kills, ranged combat. There's a skill tree. It's all very by the books, but it does still stand out in the sense that this is not something Game Freak is necessarily known for, which we did see from a follow-up interview with the game director speaking with IGN, that they are outsourcing a lot. So there's a smaller team at Game Freak overseeing and leading production on the game, but they are outsourcing a lot to get this whole project to come together. But we do know the game's coming out this summer on PS5, Xbox, and PC. So the game is also going to launch this year as well, and we'll see how that turns out. It's certainly, you know, it's got a novelty to it being that it's from Game Freak. I'm not entirely sold on it, but it does look like something I would definitely try. Now, next up was the secret 4th game, which they showed this before Fable, and that is Double Fine's Kiln, which, if I remember this correctly and say it correctly, it's called Kiln, and it's an online multiplayer pottery party brawler. So in this, you make your own pot character, which it seems like you can really deeply customize the pot character like you're doing real pottery, and then you get into 4v4 combat. So the whole goal here is you pick up water in the pots, try to get to the opposing team's kiln and put it out. But if they, crack you, you're going to spill all the water, and then they can scoop that up, bring it to your kiln. That's the sort of gameplay loop they're going with there. The game is coming out this spring, 2026, for PS5, Xbox, and PC, and there is a closed beta you can sign up for right now as well. This game looks very different, very Double Fine, which I like. I'm not sure if it's something, it's multiplayer, so obviously right off the bat, it's not nearly as compelling to me as a single-player experience, but it does look different. Tim Schafer actually explained this game came out of their internal initiative called Amnesia Fortnite, where the entire team puts down what they're doing, and for 2 weeks they just theory craft and develop gameplay prototypes, and they pitch to each other, and they all vote on it, and sometimes they end up developing that game further, whatever ends up winning, and it does release commercially, like this game, which is planned to go into a closed beta very soon. That is really neat for an initiative within the studio, because you get really different things like this, and Double Fine does tend to foster those ideas. So I love that. it's just going to be a really tough sell for this game as a multiplayer title in a very saturated market, and it's doing something a bit novel and different, and it looks a certain way, so some people might tune out immediately, but I do really appreciate that's what this game is, what it's doing, and how it came to be in the first place. Now, the next and final game is Playground Games' other big title this year, and that is Fable, which is very Fable. So we got a great explanation on the gameplay, the story, the open world. They were confirming a deep level of character customization, and of course showcasing that gameplay with a lot of the slower paced melee, but using arrows and spells, kicking chickens, very much expected too, because that is the one portion of this game we needed to know about. How Fable is it for Playground now working on this game? And they did confirm the sandbox nature of the game is still there, it's intact. You can get a job, you can mess around with the villagers, you can romance somebody, you can get a house, buy a lot of properties, all that fun stuff. A really neat thing is that there's apparently 1,000 villagers that can be talked to, and they all have their role in society, and they'll remember all your actions and what they think of you as you build out your reputation. And the game is coming out autumn 2026 for Xbox, PC, and yes, PS5 now confirmed. So that was the other thing we were curious about with Fable. It was initially a rumor. It's now confirmed for PS5, and it does appear as though the game will launch day and date with those other platforms as well, whereas with Forza Horizon, that game needs a little bit more time on PlayStation 5. But otherwise, Playground's going to be very busy putting out what appear to be some strong contenders for this calendar year. Both Fable and Forza look incredible. They look really, really fun. And it's weird, with Fable, it's always the sandbox nature that I love more than anything. So it's the sort of sim things you can do with just romancing somebody and building out wealth and buying things and just having the sort of GTA mess around with NPCs gameplay elements. So that I really like as well. But Fable was also the other standout Xbox IP. When you think about Xbox, historically, it was 4 properties: Gears, Fable, Forza, Halo, and now we know every one of those is either on PlayStation or coming to PlayStation. So it's sort of come full circle now at this point as far as Xbox and their third-party publishing arrangements. Now, the big third-party news going on is from Ubisoft, and if you remember last week I said anytime Ubisoft news comes up, usually not very good, and that is what's going on. A major company reset was announced, a lot of cancellations, and probably some more job layoffs and massive job loss going on. But initially what we are hearing is that the Prince of Persia remake, that has been canceled, and we were expecting that game this month to release on the 15th. Now, people thought it was going to be a shadow drop. It was never said to be a shadow drop, just that it could come out in January, and based on release announcement, that's why we thought maybe the TGAs or something, and that didn't happen. The closer we got to January 15th, we were expecting, okay, it has to be a shadow drop. But either way, the game was expected to come out, instead gets canceled alongside 3 new IPs, 1 unannounced title, and a mobile game also unannounced. Now, we heard right away from Tom Henderson that Beyond Good and Evil 2 survived the cancellations, and then a Ubisoft rep confirmed after the game is still alive, which is miraculous. That game is still alive after all these years and the recent culling. But another Ubisoft rep released a statement saying that the company will allocate additional development time to 7 games to ensure enhanced quality benchmarks are met for those titles. And we don't know what those games are, but we are hearing from Insider Gaming that the Assassin's Creed Black Flag remake moved from a planned March 19th launch to just straight up being delayed by a year. And in the fallout of this news, we also heard layoffs hit the Payday 3 developer Starbreeze, and the company is also enforcing a 5-day return-to-office mandate while still offering an annual allowance of working from home. So there is some movement there that you can still do. But the new subsidiary, Vantage Studios, they have a new mission statement where they want that to be the home of the franchises that can turn into annual billionaire brands. That's the exact language being used for the existing properties under that label, which is Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, and Rainbow Six. So just another massive restructure for Ubisoft, which they've been doing. That was the whole point of Vantage Studios and establishing that subsidiary. They're not done culling and moving people around, and there's likely much more job layoffs coming in. When you're doing cancellations, people are going to lose their jobs. They're going to get shuffled around. And what's crazy is that Prince of Persia remake, we were hearing the game was going to launch. Now, that was based on somewhat old information, so Tom Henderson clarified that he wasn't able to get a proper update on that, and that's why January came and went, or at least the 15th, without having that game release. So just to at least provide context on how it wasn't a surefire thing the game was going to come out, but you would have to consider we were hearing something about the game, but it seems like they just could not put this game together in a meaningful way to feel confident to release it. More so for the Assassin's Creed Black Flag thing, in the sense that it was planned to ship March of this year. Now it's a year delay. They do want to see that game end up releasing, but there's got to be some major milestones that these studios either are not hitting, or it's the typical Ubisoft issue of them really dipping their hands into the development pipeline and just requesting certain things or changing things around. They're notoriously well known for this and impeding the progress on their studios. So it's been a whole messy thing, and it's hard to see another side of this where Ubisoft comes out releasing strong content that people want to genuinely play and enjoy nowadays. There's just so much pessimism surrounding this publisher, and it's hard not to see that when so many things are happening. That just illustrates time and time again that there's consistent mismanagement of these studios, these IP, and these teams, and they're not fostering the talent properly to be the best that they can be under their labels. So with that in mind, that's the big restructure going on. The story is still developing. We'll cover up more details as more things come out. Which we did see a separate bad Ubisoft thing happen, which, if you remember, late last year, the Assassin's Creed franchise lead, Mark Alexis Coty, he left Ubisoft, and at the time, the language surrounding that departure was that with the new establishment of Vantage Studios, there was this idea that he was offered perhaps a different, lesser role, and so he decided to leave. So not really the most amicable departure, but he has now sued Ubisoft, seeking $1 million from the company because he's alleging that the new subsidiary and the job offer was more of a disguised dismissal. So he's seeking severance payment in the form of $1 million. So now we have more context on how he felt with leaving the property after leading it for 20-something years and being at Ubisoft at the helm of that franchise, which the thing is, obviously business is very cutthroat, and it's not unusual even a little bit to have new leadership come in or a new subsidiary formed, a spin-off, whatever the case is, and whoever is owning or leading that subsidiary or company or team, they want to bring in new talent or their own people. That's exactly what we were hearing at the time. It's just more a matter of how does that departure look? Are they okay with the different role, the lesser role? How are they treated? Or are they just shown the door? You know what I mean? Like, they might have told him to kick rocks, basically, if you're not going to do X, Y, and Z job. Very similar to other situations we've heard throughout the games business. So it's tough to say, right? You weren't there at the time when these things happen. That's how they feel. So we'll get more context in court filings now when that ends up releasing. But for the time being, at least, that's what's being alleged. And it would be hard to think that there's not probably a level of truth to how this guy was shown the door on this franchise. Now, in good Ubisoft news, we did see some patches go out for some PS4 games when played on PlayStation 5 through backwards compatibility. So these games now run at 60 FPS, and that is Far Cry 3 Classic Edition, Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon Classic, and Far Cry Primal. I can't remember when the last time we've had a somewhat older PS4 game get that kind of patch where it unlocks the frame rate, so when you're playing on PS5, you get that boosted frame rate. It's been a while. I'm sure it does happen on more occasions than we probably see, but it is cool to see at least those older games get that FPS bump on PS5, because that was the problem initially with PS5, is those PS4 titles might have been capped at 30 FPS, so you're not really seeing anything boosted on PS5. So it was really nice seeing a lot of studios go back and unlock those frame rates, and now we've got that for Far Cry as well. Moving on to a rumor for the Resident Evil franchise, where Aesthetic Gamer, also known as Dust Golem in various online circles, X, Recent Era, other places as well, they're quite reliable and well known for leaking things in the RE franchise and also horror properties as well, and so they were responding to some speculation on X that RE5 is getting remade next, and so he replied saying that it's actually Code Veronica that will be announced this year. And since that post, VGC has followed up with their own report, and they corroborated that rumor. So it would appear as though Code Veronica is the next title, even though there likely is some movement behind the scenes with RE5, but maybe that's further away. There's not much that's being said at this point. Capcom has done incredibly well remaking all the RE games. It's more a matter of what they get to and when. And so at least for Code Veronica, that should be announced later this year or sometime this year. I'm sure Aesthetic Gamer has more than they are at least letting it be known right now. So it's only a matter of time until they spill the beans more on this particular game. Next up, we have a small update regarding that rumor for Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas getting remastered. We're hearing again from Jez Corden, writing for Windows Central, that these games are not coming out anytime soon, although he does expect it to be Fallout 3 first and then New Vegas, and they will get the Oblivion remastered treatment where they basically look like remakes, but just know that they're not going to come out anytime soon. So that doesn't really rule out a shadow drop per se, because Bethesda's already been pretty forward about this. They want to experiment and try that more, and Oblivion seemed to really work out for them. But you would have to think that, yeah, the games are further out than expected if they did greenlight these relatively recently compared to when Oblivion came out and they realized how well that game did and the shadow drop model working as well as it did. But having said that, yeah, I would think that 3 is first. Going to look like Oblivion remastered, and then you have New Vegas after as well, which New Vegas might not be too far behind if they work on these games in tandem. Similar assets and everything. I mean, I would think that that's probably the roadmap right now. Next up, Don't Nod has confirmed their new Life is Strange game, Life is Strange Reunion, which we saw this leak out prior. Now it's confirmed, coming out very soon, March 26th, on PS5, Xbox, PC. It's going to focus on Max and Chloe's relationship, so they're diving back into that whole dynamic. The price is $50 USD. There's going to be a deluxe edition for $70, and there's also a twin pack right now for $70 as well, which that gets you access to double exposure immediately, so you can play that. Get ready for Reunion, because that kind of weaves in the story, from what I understand it, to explain away how it's Max and Chloe again, which I can't speak on the story, and we're not getting into spoilers, obviously. Maybe there's something really good, really compelling there. What I keep hearing is that they're trying to recapture the magic of the protagonist Max and now diving back into the Chloe relationship. And maybe there's something there, but I don't know. I really thought the whole idea was new cast every time. That was the point of 2. True Colors. I really enjoyed True Colors. It's like we could keep doing that. New location, new cast, different story, and take a bold, different approach to what those characters do and how they interact with each other. I don't know. Surely this is something where, it's a very risk-averse environment, so Don't Nod can maybe easily pitch another Chloe and Max scenario, which is trying to recapture that magic of the original Life is Strange, and that's easier to sell in a pitch versus a new cast and everything when Life is Strange 2 and True Colors didn't do nearly as well. But that's what sucks. I'd prefer that over more Max and Chloe, but also, I'll still probably play these games, so, what am I talking about? I would have preferred something entirely new at this point. Next up, Pearl Abyss has confirmed that Crimson Desert has gone gold. Finally! So this game, this very ambitious RPG that was announced back in 2020 and looks obscenely large and gigantic and lush and gorgeous, and they're doing all these insane things. This game is finally planned to come out on time for its March 19th release. So this, I'm very curious about. It's one of those games where it shows well, it seems very ambitious with what they're trying to sell. It's like selling a dream. It's so big, there's this huge scope, you can do anything. And we'll see if they deliver on that, because the game is coming out very soon, March 19th. So that was a gone gold news story that was certainly worth pointing out. Okay, let's move on to Highguard, the free-to-play hero shooter announced during the TGAs as the final One More Thing announcement, which that on its own caught it a lot of flack because it quite frankly doesn't show that well. It looks very derivative. It's another hero shooter. Understandably, a lot of people are kind of over that. It's not what they want to see for the final TGA announcement. So it was a very bad call on Jeff Keighley's part. And since then, there's been so much conversation surrounding how did it get to that final announcement? Who placed it there? Did they pay for it? Now, I think the general understanding at this point is that they did pay for the ad placement and announcement, but not necessarily where it was positioned in the show. That was more on Jeff Keighley's discretion, which might have been a very bad call on his part, obviously, because the game might have been much more innocuous, placed somewhere in the middle of the show. But at the same time, in theory, that means any press is good press, so it should have been at the end, and now there's more eyes on it. But either way, that whole thing went on, and so people are wondering, why is there no marketing or discussion for a game that's coming out very soon, January 26th, this Monday. Well, recently there has been some movement from, again, Jeff Keighley on his personal X account, where he was reminding people the game is launching on Monday. But we also saw trophies populate on the PSN backend, so the game does have a trophy list indicating a very imminent release. And also we're now hearing there's an event going on in LA where a lot of media sites are under NDA. So based on the planned marketing tie-in for this game, or how they were planning on doing it, it seems like it was announced, stay quiet, January comes around, you rent out this venue, this space, bring people in. That was obviously planned and coordinated well before anything, so the idea probably was be quiet up until that event, and then whenever the embargo lifts, maybe on Sunday, or I would think Monday day of, that's when they want to get a lot of eyes on the game because, oh hey, you can play it right now. I'm not sure if that was the right call, obviously, but it's just to understand that the game is still coming out on time, and the understanding was that it is a paid ad placement in the TGAs, but it might not have been their call to be the final announcement, which really does, paint a picture for Jeff Keighley's judgment on where the game should have been placed. Because it's not like the TGAs had a lack of major announcements. They could have easily positioned other things as the final announcement. It was very front-loaded, to be honest. So they could have moved things around, but that's the other thing. Highguard, at the very minimum, maybe wouldn't have nearly as much online talk as it does now, even though it's been primarily bad news, which we know that is still a very rough thing to get over from Concord. A lot of people talking about Concord, very few played it. So I don't know if the whole any press is good press thing is going to hold up here, but we will see on Monday when the game does launch, as it is planned to do so. Next up, we have more casting news for the God of War Amazon TV series. So now we know who is playing Sif and Heimdall. So Sif is going to be played by Teresa Parker, and Heimdall, Max Parker, which both of them look the part, no doubt. That's not always a complete necessity. I know people really harp on the idea that the actors have to look like the source material characters, but they do look very similar. I know Max Parker is probably going to play a very obnoxious and annoying Heimdall, because that's what that character is. But notably, what we should point out too is that the show is in a unique spot to be able to tell the story in a manner where it's not like the 2018 and then Ragnarok releases. You play 2018, there's so many characters you simply don't see because their models aren't made. They're not interwoven into the story just yet. All that stuff is not really figured out. You always hear about them through lore dumps and various text things that you can read and whatnot, but you never even see Odin, for example. Right, so we're probably going to see Odin get cast very soon. I know there is a name floating around out there for Thor, which he also looks perfect for Thor. But they have the unique opportunity to tell 2018 and Ragnarok in a very linear fashion of making sure that these characters are introduced and they play a more vital role and they can develop and flesh out further from the very beginning, season 1 and onward. So I do like that they have that benefit going for them, and that we can cast a lot of the Ragnarok characters and they're going to get some screen time versus what played out with 2018 and Ragnarok. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or X. And if you'd like to win a $10 PSN code, it is so simple. Follow the link down below or scan the QR code, enter the Gleam giveaway, and supporting this channel a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week, because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are all the stories from this past week that I wanted to talk about with you all, and our Tuesday video was an updated room tour, office tour video, sort of standard YouTube, let me show you around my stuff, but we haven't done that since I moved in and I showed you the complete setup of this room. Not a whole lot has changed, but I do explain a few of the things that I've moved around and whatnot, so that was on Tuesday. Coming up, we still got to figure out when we're doing Click R3, so that should be relatively soon, but otherwise that is pretty much it. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.